This is lesson 3 of Biology 3, Exploring Diversity for the first quarter. Our lesson for today is on the anatomy of a phylogenetic tree. At this point, we were taught about the different types of classification schemes as well as the different types of trees generated. Now it's important for us to understand more how to map out a phylogenetic tree. For example, if you're going to read in articles about the phylogenetic tree, some would look like just a tree, but some would be circular, some would be like a network, and so on. So it's very important for us to understand the different components so as to get away with ambiguity. Now, learning objectives for this lesson are the following. Describe the components of a phylogenetic tree. Discuss the purpose of each component and differentiate the different tree structures. Okay? We have the topology, node rotation, rooted versus unrooted, and then outgrouping. So, what you see here in the screen is the classical representation of the tree of life. It's amazing how diverse organisms are and how many organisms share common feature. So kahit ang layo nila tingnan, for example, at some point, butterfly can be related to a flower or butterfly can be related to a frog on the basis of shared characteristics. Ito lang yung sinasabi dito. Okay? It can be observed that the trees have different parts. Meron siyang root, meron siyang branches, and then meron siyang tips. And each tell a story about the history and relationships of the representative taxa. Maybe for this, most probably in this clade makikita ibang reptiles and so on. Iba dito yung ibang fungi. So most probably dito yung early forms of life that is closer to uh, the common ancestor of all organisms must be, for example, the archaea, bacteria, or protists and so on. Okay, so the tree of life has various lineages which originated from the bottom of the tree. So ito yung nakaparang bubble dyan, which represents the last universal common ancestor or yung ating LUCA, wherein the region of life diversified into various life forms that we have today. So do the tips closer to the LUCA or the last universal common ancestor indicate primitiveness like these ones? And how do branches relate with other lineages? So for these questions, let's find out more in the next sessions. Okay? Now, phylogenetic tree components, usually a tree would flow from left to right. So a single lineage undergoes speciation events which will later on split into two branches or what we call lineages. So in this case, X can be referred to as either a speciation event or here X or the most recent common ancestor prior to divergence. So as more time progressed, the upper branches undergo a few more speciation. So this paved the way for these branches to sprout. So later on si E naging single na lang siya, yun yung tinatawag natin na outgroup which are going to discuss later on. And these organisms right here further develop different traits. So that's why nagkaroon ng speciation at this point. Okay? So if we are going to examine the tree, here the root, which is the line here, is the most recent common ancestor, usually the line. Okay? Branches or the edges are the lineages or the taxa of interest. So for example, this is a branch, this one's another, this one, and so on. Okay? Yung branch points naman, which is an example, which X is an example of, these are the speciation events. So usually, these are annotated with the characteristics that have split or that have, caused the speciation to take place. While the leaves are the species of interest, in this case, the A, B, C, D, and E. So more often, this is referred to as the Operational Taxonomic Unit or the OTU, but as I have told you in the lesson that we had last time, it's not the updated version of what the leaves represent in a phylogenetic tree, because later on, if you're going to deal with molecular data, this is what we call the amplicon sequence variants or the ASV, na kung saan if you're going to amplify a gene, for example, so at one base point, kung merong pinagkaiba dyan, so that can be used as a metric to classify organism. So per sequence yung tinitingnan natin. And this is not the same with OTU. But anyway, for now, this is most commonly termed as operational taxonomic unit. Ibig sabihin, A and B here most probably share the same taxonomic unit. So maaring echinoderm sila, C and D might be coelenterates, and so on. Okay? So another one is that the branch can present two sets of information about the lineage. So a branch will tell us about the ancestor and then the descendants. So from the ancestral group Y, for example, the ancestral lineage, which is the pink line, ends at the most recent ancestor, which is X. So andito yung X natin. So ito yung sinasabi lang nito, yung ancestor, which is usually nasa baba. At yung descendants naman, descendants, ibig sabihin, siya yung nag-sprout from that speciation event. So, in this case, si birds at saka si crocodile. Okay? So, generally, more closely related groups share more recent common ancestors. Okay? Ang sinasabi lang dito is, compared kay birds versus cow and birds versus crocodiles, with this phylogenetic tree, sinasabi na closely related si birds kesa si birds kay crocodiles kesa si birds kay cows, simply because they share a more recent common ancestor. In this case, etong point na to. Okay? Yung pink na to as compared to cow. Although they are also closely related but not as closely related to that of crocodiles. Yun ang sinasabi dito. Okay? Now, as a concept checkpoint, let's try to look at the phylogenetic tree from Kui in 2019. So this is a phylogenetic tree of Musa iterans, which are the family of banana. Okay? And the task is to mark their corresponding recent ancestor. Sorry, coffee break. So, if you're going to task with this, all you need to do is to look for the organism that we are considering. So, Musa iterans. Ayan. So, pinapatanong, ano yung sister taxa dito? Sister taxa, ibig sabihin yung kasama niya, for example, Fraclade. So, nakikita natin that this is a branch at this other branch right here further forked out into two more. So, ibig sabihin, hindi lang si Musa balbisiana yung sister taxa or sister taxon ni Musa iterans. Kasama din si Textilis. Kasi nga, at this point, nag-diverge siya into two. And the node tells us it's 100% similar, no? At this point. I'm thinking maybe they are considering like a gene or a protein here kasi may score values eh. And it's 100% similarity. Okay? So, kasama si Textilis, kasama din si Valbisiana. Okay? Ganun lang. Now, phylogenetic tree layouts. I think this is really important to stress out kasi most papers would have different styles in presenting phylogenetic trees. I personally use, for example, unrooted. Others use rooted. So, ganun. May mga ganung preferences. So, that's why it's important that we clear about this topic. So, the first tree layout that we should look into is topology. Topology, ibig sabihin, the branching pattern of the trees have different orientation. Pwede siyang vertical, horizontal, diagonal. So, the branches may be flipped following the concept of node rotation also, which is the next topic. So, in here, makikita mo na the phylogenetic flows from left to right, ito naman bottom to top, ito naman medyo pa-diagonal. But essentially, these three trees are the same. Kasi makikita mo, E here is an outgroup, C and D are clustered together, A and B are clustered together, A and B, C and D originated from one speciation event, and that is true for the rest. A, B, C, D, E outgroup, A, B, C, D, E outgroup. Okay? So just because it looks different at the first glance does not mean it's not the same. So it's very important na tingnan muna natin. Okay? Next, node rotation. So almost the same din. Parang principle of transitivity lang siya. So the terminal branches can be rotated about a node. So importante nga na sa node siya nagro-rotate para hindi mag-change yung meaning, para hindi mag-change yung orientation ng ating phylogenetic tree. So for example here, this tree right here was rotated at this point, that is why naging DCBA na siya. Nakikita niyo yung difference? 'Di ba? Parang ni-rotate lang siya. Or if from here, pwede ding i-rotate dito in a way na si B nasa left side siya. Okay? In any of these cases, the same pa rin yung kanyang orientation. So if one is not aware of this, confusion and misinterpretations may arise. And that is true if you are going to read um, molecular biology papers kasi more often than not, you're going to encounter different ways of presenting phylogenetic tree. Okay? Ito naman, rooted versus unrooted. Ito, nakakalito din to. Some trees would actually look like circular. Some would like be networks, as I said, and then some would be branches. So kapag rooted, ang pinapakita lang dito ay meron siyang common ancestor. So ito yung heavy black line at the bottom of this tree, which goes to show na si bacteria, archaea, and eukaryotic organisms originated from a common descent. So ganun na yung pinapakita niya. Okay? While si unrooted naman, it does not include a recent common ancestor to all taxa. So usually, it's drawn in a cyclic graph and used when there is no defined common ancestor. So, ang sa akin, I usually use rooted tree if only I'm considering a certain portion of the genome. Say for example, only the protein coding regions. So ganun. So hindi ko it really depends on the researcher who's trying to portray the data. If you simply want to see if you simply want to portray or to present yung differences in the nucleotide sequences without necessarily saying na ay nanggaling sila dito sa isang common ancestor, then a rooted phylogenetic tree would suit your purpose. But if you want to say that the disparity in nucleotide sequences paved the way for the generation of new species which came from an earlier ancestor, then then a rooted tree might be better for you. Okay? Naintindihan ba at this point? Sana naman, no? If you have questions, please just let me know. And then outgroup. So usually, ang outgroup ay nilalagay on the basis as a reference for the sequences or the organisms being compared. So usually ginagamit siya, in my experience, if you have closely related organisms, so you need to present or you need to deliberately include an organism na alam mong hindi siya related with each other just so you can have an outgroup. Parang ano siya, parang alam mong outlier siya, ilalagay mo siya para mas maging better yung resolution ng iyong phylogenetic tree. So in this case, meron kang kangaroo as the outgroup. Okay? So ganun lang. As a summary, phylogenetic trees, meron tayong iba't ibang components. Napag-usapan natin yung root, branch, branch points, at saka leaves. So yung phylogenetic tree, sinabi natin na can be drawn in different forms also. Pwede siyang ma-rotate yung kanyang orientation as in the case of topology, yung kanyang node as in the case of node rotation, and then pwede mo ding ilagay kung meron siyang ancestor or wala depending on your purpose. That's for the rooted and unrooted phylogenetic trees. And you can put an outgroup which will serve as a reference when ancestors are not available or kung closely related yung organisms that you are trying to model. Okay? Now, to learn more about this topic, we can watch the links provided here para naman meron tayong external, pero para meron tayong input from external references. Okay? Thank you very much.